Hey everyone, welcome back to Thought Crime and Keto and Crime's Fun WEEN. Today, I'm doing something risque. I'm going to summarize and review for you the Netflix movie Cuties. And I know I kind of missed the boat on this a little bit. It's, this is no longer the burning story that it was. But the reason I am doing this now is because I hope if you have been watching my channel, you know I like to get the full story before I jump into anything. And so I waited for all the fervor to kind of die down a little bit so that I could actually, with a clear mind, watch this movie and actually give a clear review and analysis of it. Now, I'm a huge movie buff. And, well, before that, I want to give a good shout out, a great shout out to my patrons and my channel members. I'm not going to go through all your names today, but you know who you are, and I love you so much. With that being said, if you'd like to subscribe or join, those buttons are down below, as well as a link to my Patreon. Always appreciated, never ever required. But guys out there, you have my heart, and you know that our monthly hangout is coming up soon. I will be posting about that. So anyway, back to what I was saying. I am a huge film buff. Horror films are my absolute favorite, and that's the reason I love Halloween so much, and I really am glad that I'm going to be able to do some horror movie reviews and commentary as part of this channel as well. But I think that part of true crime is controversial subjects, and this was definitely controversial. Now, as I said, a huge film buff, and I started watching all kinds of unusual movies from the time I was little. At the age of 13, I watched my first European movie, which was a Swedish movie called Pelle the Conqueror. Now, this is about a young boy and his family that moved to the Sweden, the Netherlands area of Europe. They're immigrants, and it kind of shows how he tries to assimilate into the local culture. More the Netherlands than Sweden, but it was a Swedish movie. And how along the way he, as a young child, like a 13, 14-year-old kid, comes into his sexual awakening in a pretty risque scene with another with a young girl, but it's not shown. Like, it was very tastefully done. You knew what happened, but you didn't see it. These were both children that were coming into their sexual awakening together. And then later on, as he gets older, he has an affair. He and one of his friends gets someone pregnant, and his father actually has him castrated. Yeah, this is wild. And I watched this at like age 13. And then he actually falls in love with an older woman, like in her 20s. He's 18 by this time, so he is of age. And then it shows their affair and what happens, and him coming into his own. So if you want a good old watch, Pelle the Conqueror is a good one. I watched this at age 13, and I really enjoyed it. That, to me, is what you call a coming-of-age movie. And European standards of conduct, you got to remember this, European standards of decency are very different than Americans. Americans, we tend to be a little stick in the mud. But for the most part, in Europe, you're going to see a lot more sex, a lot more sexual posturing. You'll even see more graphic, like what would be considered like HBO territory here, or Cinemax late at night territory on prime time in Europe. But you won't see as much, but you won't see violence. Like, we will have a lot more violence in prime time than sex. And there could be a whole argument there about which is more damaging. But I'm just laying this out. So I watched a lot of foreign film and a lot of foreign coming-of-age film, and they all did it in a much more risque way than, say, American or Canadian filmmakers would do. But they had one thing in common. They were never too graphic. So if it involved two young children, 12, 13, going through puberty and going into some sort of sexual experimentation, it would show that in a tasteful way, in that it was only implied, you never saw it, if that makes sense. So I was used to European coming of age movies, which is why the controversy about Cuties, which is a French coming of age movie made by a Senegal Muslim French director who was an immigrant. I figured this one would probably be pretty good. And then the controversy hit. And the controversy mainly hit because of the difference between the French poster, which I will put here, and the American poster that Netflix created to market it as far as the United States. And I'll put that here. So I think you can see quite easily the difference in those two posters. The French poster is much more young preteens coming into their own kind of age, having a fun shopping day. And the American is kind of gross, kind of exploitative. So you can see that Netflix kicked off this shitstorm by virtue of sexualizing the movie from the beginning. Just by the difference between those two posts. Now, was that intentional or was it unintentional? I think it was intentional. You can't fool me, Netflix. I think you know that controversy sells. And I think you know that a lot more people watched this movie. Not people like me that might have watched it because it was a foreign film. But there's a lot of people that watch this that would never have watched this because of the controversy. So Netflix, you can't tell me that wasn't intentional. Just, no, don't even try. And even though they tried, to tone it down and blah, 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 but think about it. Controversy sells on YouTube. When Tana Mojo or Jake Paul or somebody, or, Jeffree Star or James Charles gets into Dramageddon, don't we all click on their videos? I don't follow the makeup community, obviously. But when Dramageddon was going down, you better believe I watched every Jeffree Star, every Toddy Westbrook, every James Charles video, just because it was drama and controversy. So Netflix pulled off the most brilliant marketing for this unknown French film that I've ever seen. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. But basically, this director, and I'm going to absolutely butcher her name, so if you're out there, forgive me. Maïmouna Doucouré. Actually, this won a couple of prizes at Sundance, although some of those executives at Sundance that praised this film so much have since been busted for, let's say, improprieties with young people. So, fits a mold, I suppose. Anyway, so it came out to generally positive reviews from Sundance. Now, Sundance, cons, those kinds of things, they review art house films and, what we would call hoity-toity type films with more of a lofty aspiration than just your average summer blockbuster. So I guess their standards, they read between the lines a little bit more than the average person. So this film probably would not have done well at the theater, except for the push that it got from Netflix. Again, that was planned. You can't tell me that it wasn't. So think of it as an art house film. All right, now I did watch the film, and this director, Ms. Doucouré, did say that she, as a young Senegalese Muslim living in France, did go to a dance contest where these young girls, 10 and 11 years old, were twerking and doing very suggestive sexual moves on stage. And she thought she was both mesmerized and horrified by it, as any young child would be. So she grew up always remembering that and wanted to make a movie that commented on the sexualization of children, not only by adults by virtue of dance contests, and let's not forget pageants, y'all. I'm going to throw the pageant circuit out there. Remember John Benet Ramsey? I'll drop a picture right here. Look at that little girl. She was on the pageant circuit, put in very adult situations in bathing suits and evening wear, and probably led to why she was killed, because that's still an unsolved murder. Definitely had something to do with her murder, probably murdered at the hands of a predator. If not by somebody in her own family, we may never know. But definitely that had something to do with it. And if you look at shows like Dance Moms or even like Honey Boo Boo, you know, the whole pageant reality show, you see these children being sexualized, being put in adult situations that young children. My mother tried to put me in beauty pageants as a kid, and I was having none of it. I would like pull down my hair. I had nothing of it. I ran off stage in one. I did not want to be in one. But you would have these kids put in very adult situations for adult entertainment. Let's be clear. Children don't sit around and watch pageants. That's for adults. That's for adult entertainment. And I don't mean like X-rated. I just mean they are sexualized and put into adult situations for grown people's entertainment. And that's not right. So I understand her outrage being a child, seeing that and wanting to speak out against it. Now, how successful was she? She was very successful in showing us the evils of sexual exploitation of children, putting children into adult situations. But I do have beef with the movie. And with that, I'm going to jump into a summarization of the movie, and then I'm going to point out things that I think were done good and things that I think were done right. And I want to preface this before people come at me. I want to preface this. The most shocking shots in this movie, which were camera pans on these young girls' chests, rears, and other private areas, were uncalled for and unneeded. She could have had the same powerful effect that the film ultimately has without showing any of that. It's kind of like the old joke, you know, speaking out against animal cruelty by shooting puppies or stomping on kittens. You don't do it that way. You can speak out against that stuff by leaving an impression another way. So she made a lot of wrong choices in this movie. And in the end, I'm going to give you my final comment on the movie. But with that, let's get into the plot and a brief summarization of the movie. Let's go. All right, so the movie centers around Amé. You can also call her Amy, a young Senegalese Muslim girl being raised in what appears to be a housing project or just a kind of a low rent apartment building in a city in France. I'm not even going to say it was Paris because I don't know, but somewhere in a city in France, in either a housing project or just a low rent apartment building. Amé is living with her family, and her family consists of her mother, Miriam, and her younger brother, Ismail, and a baby boy that we only see a few times through the movie. There's also an older Senegalese Muslim woman that we only know as Auntie, that appears to be the traditional matriarch of the conglomerate of Muslims that live in this building. It's not just a Senegalese, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing anything, I mean no disrespect, Senegalese Muslims, but it's also other Muslims from other countries, not just African countries, but also Middle Eastern countries that are there. And this auntie appears to be kind of the matriarch, and she leads them in traditional Muslim teachings about women, where women should be stoic, women should be pristine, women should never expose themselves, women should be pious, is mainly what I got. And so she's kind of the leader of this enclave. And then you have a group of girls known as the Cuties that are basically they form their own dancing troupe. And these girls are Angelica, who also lives in the same building, Yasmin, who, there's an interesting twist with Yasmin, Jess, and Samba. And they form a dance group known as the Cuties. So at first we meet Amé. She is doing her best to absorb, Auntie's teachings and just to kind of assimilate to what she knows her parents want her to be. Her father is still in Senegal, and during the course of the movie, her mother Miriam gets a phone call from her father in which she learns that he has taken a second wife per Islam tradition, per Senegal tradition, and that her mother, by virtue of being the first wife, has to agree to this and has to help with this. So basically, they want to have the wedding in France. So Amé is hiding under her mother's bed. She was in there, forget exactly what she was doing, but she was in there and she hides under her mother's bed. And she hears her mother, who part of the tradition is you have to call other family members and tell them the wonderful news that your husband's about to marry another woman. And so she's calling all these people, but in the middle of it, she breaks down and cries, and her mother, and Amé hears all this. And so after her mother leaves the room, Auntie comes in and tries to talk to Miriam, but Amé leaves under the bed and ends up going down to the laundry room of the apartment building. And there she sees a young girl who would turn out to be Angelica of the Cuties ironing her hair. That's a thing, I'm sure, with women. I've never did it, but, ironing her hair. And she's also dancing around to pretty provocative French pop music and while washing the clothes. And Angelica turns around and sees Amé, but Amé runs away before Angelica can say anything to her. So we kind of fast forward back up to the apartment where she is feeding her brother, Ismail, breakfast. And they have this weird communication. Whenever she gives Ismail his cereal, he asks, "How many do I get?" So she just gives him a big old handful and tells him 50. That's nowhere near the same. But it's a game they play, and it seems to make him happy. So we see them feeding him breakfast, and then her going to school. She just has on jeans and a backpack, average school kids wear. And then she's waiting in the outdoor play area of the school, and a school administrator comes out giving her class schedule, and then all of a sudden, all the kids in the lot or in the park area kind of just stop and do this mannequin challenge where they just freeze, and you see a few people walking around with their cameras, evidently taking pictures of it for social media. And then the administrator gets upset and goes over and starts asking people, "What's going on here? What's going on here?" And so they finally break it up. And then for the second time, she sees the Cuties, who she actually saw practicing their dance moves in a park on the way to school. And they kind of call her out because they saw her kind of watching them. And Yasmin tends to be, I think, kind of the leader. I think she's the one that has the money. She's also, girl's kind of chubby. And she's also the tallest, so she's the biggest of the girls. But eventually they end up befriending Amé. Even though Amé is not part of the group, they invite Amé to watch them rehearse, and they go to this park area and they put down cardboard boxes, and they practice on that. And Amé actually stole her cousin's cell phone. Now, her cousin was there helping bring in stuff for the wedding, for her father's wedding to his second wife. He brought, he brought traditional Senegalese wedding dresses and bridesmaids dresses for all the women, and, stuff for the cooking and stuff like that. And so Amé's helping carry all this stuff into the apartment. But the owners of this apartment building just let these people do whatever, it seems, so there's all this traffic in the hallways and stuff, but it's kind of weird. But anyway, so while she's unloading one of the vans, she sees her cousin he says, "Hey, can you look up front and get me that folder that's up there?" So she goes up to the front, leans over, but she also sees his cell phone. So she just takes his cell phone, and I guess the charger too, because this thing never died the entire movie, so she had to have taken a charger. Anyway, so she takes it for herself, and she goes online and goes to this same social media platform that all the kids in school use, and it's not Instagram, but it's like Instagram, it's photos and people liking. So she creates a profile, and she takes selfies of herself. And so she is looking at the the pictures she just posted, and all these people are liking them and commenting on them, and she feels love because right now she's feeling very neglected because her father is in Senegal and her mother is upset about what's going on, so she's really kind of ignoring Ame at this time. So she, as I said, she had befriended the cuties, and they have her come to the practices just to film them. So she films them on this phone, and she uploads the videos of their practices to their social media. So they get lots of likes and stuff like that. And so she's obsessed with the dancing. So she gets, every night after she's supposed to be in bed, she goes and locks herself into the bathroom and she practices all these dance moves and learns them perfectly. Meanwhile, Angelica lives in the same building, so they become very close. Angelica confesses to Ame that her parents kind of ignore her, they're disappointed in her, and when she posts on social media, she feels loved. And I think these are two very important points. The fact that these children feel neglected or are neglected, and then they look to social media, as so many people do, for affection and for a feeling of self-worth. And so that's the first statement that I think the director's trying to make, is how social media turns us all into, exhibitionists in a way. For a world of voyeurs, we are the exhibitionists. And there's something to that, especially with young children. I see young children that have accounts on Instagram all the time that are doing things that I'd have got my butt whipped for when I was their age. So you see lots of things like that. So it's a very important statement that she makes with that. So later on, we see them back at school, and Angelica has a crush on this one boy. And so they follow him to the bathroom. Or may follow him into the bathroom and try to take a picture of his, while he's at the bathroom. And he, curses her out for it and runs, and she didn't get the picture, but the cuties kind of considered that her initiation into the group. And prior to this scene, she had been hiding in a stall in the girls' bathroom, listening to these older girls talk crap about sex, talking about urination on each other and stuff like that. Just stuff that girls that age have no business talking about. And also people, they don't know crap. They don't know really what they're talking about. And so they're just inventing stuff. And so after the incident where they tried to get her to take a picture of the boy's pee-pee, they all end up out at a park where they're kind of sitting around, and Angelica finds a used condom. They have no idea what it is. She blows it up and starts trancing around at it, and they go, "Ooh, that's what people with AIDS use so they can have sex. You've got AIDS now," and blah, 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 blah. And they make fun of her and they chastise her. So they go back to Yasmin's house and they actually scrub her mouth out with soap and hand sanitizer and all kinds of stuff to keep her from getting AIDS from blowing up that condom. So then it shows them in Yasmin's bedroom, and they're chatting with this older teenage boy on some kind of, FaceTime or, Skype. But they tell him that the camera is broken, but they're asking him all kinds of sexual questions. You can see him turning red and stuff. So in the middle of it, Angelica decides she's going to play a joke. So she reaches over and flips on the camera real quick. And this boy sees it's a bunch of young girls and he gets upset. And he starts telling them, no, go back, play with your dolls. This is wrong. I thought you were older, blah, 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 blah. So Yasmin gets mad and closes the laptop real quick, and then her and Angelica get into it, and Angelica gets so mad she grabs the laptop and slings it, and of course that pisses Yasmin off because that's her laptop. I'd be pissed off too. You're 11, but you're about to get your butt whooped for throwing my laptop. So all the girls kind of storm out, and from that time on, Yasmin is kind of thrown out of the cuties. And because Angelica and Jess and Samba are all, they're mad at her. They're mad at her for leading them down that path and stuff like that. So basically, Ame, they're about to try out for this competition. So they kind of allow Ame to step in when she proves to Angelica that she knows all the moves. And she has been watching all kinds of music videos and stuff like that, like videos of actual strippers, things like that. So she has learned a lot more moves than even the cuties knew, and she teaches them these very provocative moves. Very. And so we see them practicing, they're filming their practices, getting more and more sexual with all their moves, and they're putting them on the social media, and they're getting all these hearts, and they talk about how much people like them. And so they finally get to the day of the tryouts for this competition. And Ame is woken up at 5 a.m. and by Auntie, who says they're going to start preparing the food for her father's wedding. And so she makes Ame prep all this food, and then about 5 minutes before she's supposed to be at the tryouts, she's having Ame help her carry this stuff, like on their head, like a traditional Senegalese woman. And she just puts the stuff down and runs to the competition. Well, she gets there too late. The other three are already in there doing the tryout, and they do good. And then afterwards, they confront her at school. She tries to explain what happened. They're all angry with her and stuff. And all during this time, like right after the tryouts, she goes home and she gets scolded by Auntie and by her mother. But while she's standing there taking her scolding from Auntie, we pan down and we see that she has started her monthly visitor. And then both her mother and her aunt tell her, now you're a woman. Now we have to prepare you for marriage. Well, the auntie says that. The mother doesn't. But they both say you're a woman. And this whole time I'm sitting there, no, she's not. She's an 11-year-old girl with a physical maturity, but she's not a woman. So after she finally, kind of gets her way back in with the cuties, she actually takes them on a shopping spree with money she stole from her mother's wallet. And she buys them all kinds of stuff for the competition. She also buys her little brother a drone. Her brother gets caught with the drone, and he tells her where he got it. The mother really doesn't punish her. She's just very disappointed, and she walks on by her. Then there's a scene where Miriam is making dinner for them, and she collapses, and the brother is really upset and gets down, Mama. Ame doesn't even bat an eyelid. She just keeps doing what she's doing. So it kind of shows a growing tension between the girl and her mother. And so we fast forward to this scene where the girls, the cuties, break into or follow some kids into like a laser tag area, and they get caught in there without paying, and the security guard is threatening to call their parents, and they say, you can't do that, we're celebrities, and they end up dancing. Like Ame ends up dancing, and there's one security guard that's like really taken aback, wants them to stop. The other security guard is looking at her like a drooling fool, just a typical predator. And then they finally run out of there when they get the text that they got into the contest. So they're all real happy, and they welcome Ame back onto the team. So they're practicing for this contest. They're doing more and more sexual moves and putting them all on Instagram or social media. And so they're doing really well. They're really poised to win this thing. Happens that the dance contest is the same day as her father's wedding. And this entire time, she's been staring at the dress that her father sent her to wear in the wedding that's hanging in her closet. And she keeps having these hallucinations of blood running down it. So this is some connection to her just starting her monthly visitor. So she's starting to, I guess, fight against the maturity that's coming on her a little bit. Very symbolic. And so we get closer to the dance competition, and she's helping. Her and Angela are there like hanging out at the apartment, and they go into this room that her mother's been working in but won't let anybody in. And Angelica just barges up in there, and it's like evidently the room for the new bride and the father, and it's this beautiful king-size bed and all these wonderful things in it, and they end up sitting in that room and playing even though they're not supposed to. Meanwhile, she locked Ismael, the younger brother, in the bathroom so he wouldn't bother her, and gave him a bunch of gummy bears, and then he floods the entire apartment by trying to turn the bathtub into a swimming pool. And I guess they cleaned that up because we never hear about it again. But then there's another day where they're bringing in more stuff for this wedding, and she's sitting in the hallway watching videos on the phone, and the cousin happens to walk through and go, "That's my phone." And he wants his phone back. And so he's chasing her, and she locks herself into the bathroom, not wanting to come out. And he says he's not leaving until he gets his phone back. Well, she is, I guess, so desperate to get one more post on social media because she has just become addicted to the admiration she gets on there for all the wrong reasons. And so she takes a very provocative shot. I'll leave that to your imagination. And she posts it. And then she gives him his phone back. So the next day at school, when she's called up, she's been wearing very tight leather pants, very provocative clothing to school. She gets called up to do a math problem on the board, and this boy reaches out and slaps her on the butt. She turns around and slaps him back, and there's a fight, and he talks about she's a slut because she puts pictures of herself on social media. So the mother gets called, and she finds out what's been going on, and she actually threatens. She said, if we were in our home country, I would kill you." I mean, just literally, she meant it, literally kill this girl. So she ends up calling in a clergyman who sits and speaks with him, and he guarantees her that her daughter, the daughter is not possessed, even though they try to do this exorcism type thing where she starts doing one of her cuties dances, like the demon coming out of her, and they're throwing water on her because earlier in the movie they told her that water washes away all sins, and then this guy tells them that there's no evil here. She's just having some problems. So the mother kind of tells Auntie to back off. Meanwhile, the cuties throw her out of the group because they're sickened by what she posted on social media, and they think that now everybody thinks they're sluts too, and they're getting all these calls to post X-rated videos of themselves. They don't want to do it, so they bring Yasmin back in. And so we fast forward to the day of the wedding and the dance contest. Ame runs away. She runs to the place where she hides all of her cuties outfits, and she puts on her uniform for the dance contest, and then runs toward the dance contest. She sees Yasmin on her way to the contest, and she runs full blast at this girl and just knocks her into the water. And this girl, I think she's going to drown, and Ame's just watching her, but she finally, pulls herself out, but now she can't go to the contest because her costume's ruined, and she's all wet. So Ame runs to the contest and gets in behind stage with the cuties, and they're like, "Why are you here? Where's Yasmin?" And she won't tell them, and they realize, well, Yasmin's late. We can't go on with just 3, so I guess Ame will get to go. So they go out, they're announced, and they're trying to beat this other group known as the Sweetie Swags, that they've been watching a lot of videos of them, and the Sweetie Swags leave the stage. They go on. They do a very provocative dance. Chest shots, butt shots, other shots that you've been seeing all throughout the movie, that this movie would have had the same message without. And so they do the dance contest. They're almost at the end when Ame has this epiphany. We're not sure what it is, but she runs off stage. She runs all the way home. She gets to her mother, who's now dressed in her wedding garb, and the mother hugs her and says, "You don't have to go to this if you don't want to." So the mother goes, and Ame's left alone in her room, and on her bed, she shares a room with her little brother. He sleeps on a top bunk. She sleeps on a bottom bunk. And on her bed, there is her wedding dress, or her dress that she was supposed to wear at the wedding, that represents what her traditional upbringing wants her to be. And then there's the cuties outfit on her bed as well, and she's looking at them. So it's like, does she go forward on the path that she's been on, or does she go back? And then suddenly we see her, she's just dressed in jeans, red t-shirt, tennis shoes, and she runs down the stairs, runs through the wedding. Her mother sees her and smiles, and then she runs outside and starts jump roping with these kids outside in the street. And that's where the movie ends, with her jumping rope. And so the symbolism there is that she chose to be something in between sinner and saint, like we all are, and to move forward with her life that way. She's not going to be traditional, but she's not going to go down the dark path that she was on. And so the coming of age portion of this movie is there. It talks about the dangers of social media. It talks about this girl fighting against two sides of her own self. I mean, that's very much understood. It was very symbolic, and I think it is a great coming of age story. However, where this movie fell short is the needless, the totally unnecessary sexualized shots of these young girls. There was no need every time these girls dance for the camera to be right in places where they shouldn't have been. And I think this was done for one reason and one reason only: provocative, making things provocative, where more people will watch it. And unfortunately, even though I think this is a great coming of age film, I think it's also bait for the wrong kind of people, because there are people that are going to watch this for nothing more than sexual gratification, which is why I think if you cut those parts out, you can do those with facial shots, you can do them with long range shots, you're showing them dancing, you can do this with all kinds of shots, you can go to black when the music starts. That's even more symbolism. There are lots of ways to do this without actually sexualizing children. Or you could hire girls that are 18, 19, 20 that look young to play these parts. So that's where you failed, and that's where I think this movie kind of got trashed. The coming of age story is there, it's intact, it's good, just like many other European coming of age, but the way it was handled was trashy. And it does set this movie up to be bait for the wrong kinds of people. And I'll just leave it there. So if you want to watch this movie, definitely, I would not have any children in the room. I would definitely watch this. Fast forward through those parts. If they make you uncomfortable, I would. I only watched it because I wanted to do an honest review. So I hope you enjoyed this. And I will see you next time. Keto Comment.